Hey everybody, welcome to week 2 of online class. I hope everybody's doing good. I trust that you all are taking care of yourself, that you are healthy and staying home as much as possible, reducing risk of exposure. And I hope that the class is going well and you made the transition successfully to online. So let's get rolling on week 2. Got my spirit wear on, fired up, ready to go, talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is psychopathology and the DSM system. I want to talk just a little bit about psychopathology itself. You know, mental illness has been around as long as people have been around. We, in the field, diagnosed things like the first case of anorexia nervosa was in the 1400s. And they have had a lot of names for mental illness over the years. The things you used to call your brothers and sisters were actually once diagnostic terms. Things like idiot, things like lunatic, which I'm certain that you have called your brother or your sister or all of the above at one time or the other, were once diagnostic terms. Because as the system for diagnosis evolved, it became more refined, and the language has changed tremendously in the last 150 years or so. But the diagnosis of mental illness has been around a long, long time. Mental illness was first treated by the church because it was thought that it was an issue of morality and or demonic possession. And so who deals with that but the church? And so the church built centers to treat these folks, and they were called insane asylums or sanitariums, and they had some wonderful radical treatments like dunking chairs and things like that, so that they thought that if the host, the person with the demon inside them, was near death, like with drowning, they strap them in this chair, dunk them in a tub of water or in a pond, and let the person almost drown. Then the spirit would flee, because if the spirit was trapped once the body died, then the folks, then the spirit couldn't get out. It was trapped in there forever. So they had those wonderful thoughts and those wonderful inventions, and insanity was dealt with by the church, and the treatment of mentally ill was by the church. But really the insane asylums, as I mentioned a while back talking about Clifford Beers and his experiences with mental illness in the late 1800s, early 1900s, were more like just jails and or warehouses. And I told you that the name Bedlam came from a contraction of the name of the hospital just outside London called Bethlehem Hospital, which with a Cockney accent became Bedlam Hospital, and that term Bedlam means chaos. So the church did the first treatment of the mentally ill for, say, the first 1,000 years that there was organized treatment of the mentally ill, up until probably the turn. There's still some, of course, religious affiliated hospitals, faith-based affiliated hospitals, but they were largely responsible for the care of the mentally ill for 1,000 years before the medical community began seeing it as a disease, as an illness, instead of demonic possession. And we have just in the last 30-ish years probably shaken off the idea that a lot of these things are moral diseases, issues of morality. Things like alcoholism is understood to be an addictive disease now, rather than a weakness of character or a flaw in the character, as it was for the last however long there's been drinking problems. It used to be called dipsomania back in the 1800s, and first half of the 20th century probably that word was still tossed around, dipsomania. That's a pretty interesting word, but anyway, that's what alcoholism was called back in the day. So because things were called so many different things, and because different groups, the medical professionals saw things this way, psychologists saw things that way, social work counselors saw things the other way, it was decided back in the middle 1900s, around 1952, that there needed to be a common classification system for the diagnosis of mental illness, and the DSM system was born. DSM stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it's gone through many iterations. We are currently on the DSM-5, which would seem to imply that there have been 5 editions of this thing. Au contraire, that's not the way bureaucracies work. In fact, there have been 7 of these things. There was the DSM, which was written around 1952. Then the DSM-2 came along in the early 1960s, around 62. And you don't need to remember these dates, just that you know that I'm a history person, right? So all this stuff sticks in my head, but you don't need to know it per se. Then the DSM-3 came along in 77 or 78. Then they did a revision of the DSM-3 in, I believe it was 84, the DSM-3R. Then they did the DSM-4 around 95. Then they did DSM-4TR, text revision, DSM-4TR around 2004. And then the DSM-5 came out in 2013. And the DSM, the way that it works, or what it's about, is an atheoretical system. It's not dependent on theory. It simply describes various categories of mental illness and various specifiers, things that specifically identify an illness. And they are then categorized as the mental illness based on the clusters of symptoms. There'll be more about this in the PowerPoint, and I don't want to and other readings that we're going to assign you. And so I don't want to steal all of that thunder. But what you need to know at the heart of it is that the DSM system is an atheoretical system. It is not dependent on what theory you practice, that it classifies mental illness by clusters of symptoms. And the idea behind it is, if a psychologist walks in the room, if a psychiatrist walks in the room, if a counselor walks in the room, no matter what mental health professional walks in the room and sees a client, sees a patient, or reads through their chart and reads about the symptomatology, we would all arrive at roughly the same conclusion, that because the DSM system is not based on any particular theory nor on any particular treatment modality. It just gives the statistics of prevalence, such as gender and demographics, about what populations are most susceptible to certain illnesses. Sometimes it's female prominent, sometimes it's male dominated illness, but frequently they're kind of split right down the middle. Excuse me. And so when you are thinking through the DSM system, view it through that lens, that it's atheoretical. It's not prescribing any theory as an underpinning, nor is it prescribing any treatment modality as an underpinning. So I really enjoy studying psychopathology. I'm probably an odd duck, but like many of you, if you majored in undergrad in psychology, then you probably were just interested in what makes people tick. And so I have always been interested in what makes people lose their ability to function, what's going on with them that causes them struggles in the ability to carry on the normal task of daily living. So I hope you find it as interesting as I do. I think there's a lot of things to really learn and enjoy and kind of latch on to, because our field is very deep in this study. There's lots of good information. We as counselors have the ability to diagnose. Once you're fully licensed, you're able to diagnose. So when you're studying this and when you take the course a little bit later, it's something that you need to take really seriously, because you need to be really careful about assigning diagnoses to people, because it's going to follow them the rest of their life. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope the materials are meaningful to you and that you get a lot out of it, and it's a good learning experience this week. As always, let us know if you have any questions or any concerns or any particular difficulty with the items that you are studying or trying to prepare for, and we are happy to help. We are available for Zoom sessions. I keep virtual office hours. Text me. I put my number up on the Canvas, so you can text me on my cell phone. You can always email, and all four of us, me and Caroline and Mary Elizabeth and Ralph, are all happy to work with you in any way that we can. So go get this material and break a leg. We'll see you next time.